Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Well, we are sitting here towards the end of December, the end of the year. So that means a new year will soon be upon us. And of course, with that, for many comes the New Year's resolutions. I think every January, most people do the same sort of thing. They kind of draw this clean line in the sand. This is a new year. It's going to be a new me. It's time for a fresh start. This is the year I finally fix my finances, or I finally get in shape, or I'm more present, or I'm more disciplined, or whatever it is. And for about 2 weeks, for most, it works. But then life shows up. Work gets busy, kids get sick, you've got a bunch of travel, and your motivation maybe starts to fade. By February, most resolutions are pretty dead. Here's the reality. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most resolutions don't fail because you or people in general are lazy. They fail because they're built on the wrong foundation. Resolutions are usually built on emotion, they're not built on structure. And emotion is pretty unreliable under pressure. So let's dig a little deeper into this today and figure out what we can do instead. So let's start by just going a little further with respect to why resolutions fail. Most resolutions, in my opinion, are what we would call identity neutral. I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to make more money, or I want to read more books. These are all outcomes. They're not identities. See, behavior typically follows identity. Behavior follows identity. So if you don't change who you believe you are, it's unlikely that you're going to sustain whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to add behaviors without updating your self-image, it's not the recipe for success. So again, most resolutions, number one, are identity neutral. Number two, resolutions are fairly outcome obsessed. And outcomes, results, they're lagging indicators. You don't wake up and control the scale. You don't control revenue right now. You don't control mood on command. You actually can control your behaviors. So most resolutions seem to skip behaviors entirely. And then lastly, in terms of why resolutions fail, they really rely on willpower. And willpower is just not a great long-term strategy. Willpower is finite. Willpower is emotional. Willpower can certainly collapse under stress. Let me give you a good example, or a cleaner example that actually maps out. Think about sales teams every January. The leadership of that sales team rolls out some big annual goal. This year we're going to close 30% more, or this year we're going to dominate our market. And the team's all fired up, and there's this big kickoff music, and energy is high, vision is cast. But here's what oftentimes does not change. There's not a change in daily call volume. There's not a change in the follow-up systems. The calendar structure remains unchanged. Accountability rhythms stay the same. So what happens? Well, January, because of the energy, feels different. Then February starts to look familiar. And March and thereafter tells the truth. The teams that actually grow don't rely on enthusiasm. They redesign daily behavior. So they look for non-negotiable call blocks. So they look for weekly pipeline reviews. They look for clear lead measures or leading indicators over the lag. Same people, the same market, just different systems. And that's why resolutions fail. They ask people to feel their way into change instead of actually engineering it. So if that's what doesn't work, what actually does work? If you want something to stick, here's what I think works. Number one, shrink the time frame. Now, this is a concept that came out of my favorite book of 25, which is The Science of Scaling. Shrink the time frame. Annual resolutions are way too abstract, but weekly commitments are much more concrete. So that works. Shrinking the time frame works. Forget about resolution and annual goal. Let's just go after a week or 2 weeks. Next, I would say, what works? Design for friction. What do I mean? Make bad habits harder, make good habits easier. It's the idea of creating downhills versus uphills, right? Downhills mean the good things are easier, you accumulate speed. Uphills would be the hard things are harder to do because you make it more challenging on yourself. Design for friction. What also works, I mentioned it already, tracking behaviors, not outcomes. You've heard the phrase, you don't rise to goals, you fall to systems. Track your behaviors, which are your lead measures, and not so much the outcomes. If you believe that your lead measures will push you further towards that end game, then you track those things, and over the course of time, you get to that goal. So as we wrap up today, here's what I think is the move. Instead of the traditional New Year's resolution, let's pick one identity-based behavior that you can execute 80% of the time for, let's call it 30 days. Not something that's heroic, not something that's perfect, just something that's repeatable. So pick a behavior, an identity-based behavior you can execute most of the time for the next 30 days. And let's anchor to that. And after those 30 days, we'll reset, we'll see what our new focus is. But I've found personally that this is so much better than a grand New Year's resolution. Let's just focus on what's in front of us for a shorter period of time and make sure that it's based on who you are, who you want to become, and not some outcome. Momentum does not come from intensity, it comes from the consistency. That's all I have for you today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.